Today we're going to be reading Chapter 3 and 4 of Doyle and Fossey's Science Detectives, The Case of the Mossy Lake Monster. Chapter 3, A Major Disaster. The solution in the flask bubbled and boiled. It rumbled and roiled. It shuddered and kablamo! Waving away the smoke, Drake pushed up his safety glasses and wrote in his notebook, Never do that. Experiment, a disaster. We'll clean up a mess. Just then there was a scratch and a woof at the attic door. Dr. Livingston, I presume, said Drake, opening the door. And indeed, it was Dr. Livingston, trotted in and sat in the middle of the lab, wiggling his tail and coughing, a bit because of the smoke. Good boy, said Drake, withdrawing a blank sheet of paper from Dr. Livingston's pouch. He flicked off the overhead lights and turned on a purplish ultraviolet light. The paper glowed white. The words, however, didn't glow at all, making it easy to read. Detective Doyle, if you're reading this, Dr. Livingston has arrived as planned. Take good care of him. Look after Nature Headquarters, too. I will return in 1 week. Signed, Naturalist Nell. P.S. Don't blow up the lab. Drake pushed his glasses and sighed. It was going to be a long week without Nell. She was vacationing on Penguin Island with her mother. Together they were studying penguins. Nell had taken all her homework and promised a full report to their 5th grade class at Seaview Elementary upon her return. Well, old boy, said Drake to Dr. Livingston, looks like it's just us. Woof, Dr. Livingston replied. The next day after school, Drake hurried to Nell's house. She didn't live far, just over the hill and past the park. As Drake entered Nell's room, his glasses fogged. They always fogged because it was a little steamy. Rather like a jungle, really. It was known as Nature Headquarters. Papier-mâché trees soared to the ceiling. Vines dangled and giant leaves sparkled. Cages, aquariums, and terrariums were everywhere. There were chirps and cheeps and squeals and squeaks. It smelled like a mossy bog, topped off with the turtle burps and guinea pig poo. If you haven't figured it out by now, Nell was, quite naturally, a naturalist. Nature was her specialty. Beetles, bats, baboons, bears, belugas. She loved them all. Just as Drake was tossing some salad to the gerbils, he heard Nell's voice. Psst. Calling Drake Doyle. Psst. Are you there? Do you read me? Drake was so startled he tossed a bit more salad than he'd planned. Lettuce, carrots, and cucumbers flew everywhere. Nell's voice was coming from the computer on her desk. Drake pushed aside a few leaves and ferns and turned on the monitor. There was Nell, on the screen, large as life. Reading you loud and clear, Naturalist Nell. Oh, thank goodness you're there, she cried. I left on my internet view camera and microphone just in case. Smart thinking, Drake replied in his most professional voice. He removed a piece of lettuce from the top of his head. What's the problem? It's just terrible. It's just horrible. It's just... take it from the top, Naturalist Nell, and speak slowly. Nell wiped her face, leaving a dark, dirty smudge. Her naturalist cap was crooked, and her hair was a mess. Her raincoat and boots were covered with brownish black goo. She stood on a beach while a helicopter whizzed overhead. As you know, I'm here on Penguin Island with Professor Fossey. Check. Just as we began to study the little penguins, an oil tanker ran aground, and now there's an oil spill. Great Scott, cried Drake, aghast. You're right. This is terrible. This is horrible. This is a major disaster. And it was a disaster. A terrible, horrible, major disaster. The penguins need our help, said Nell. Observe. The camera panned away from Nell. Beside her, using tables and plastic tubs, dozens of people were bathing oily penguins. Drake saw Professor Fossey up to her elbows in sudsy water. She smiled and waved, flinging a few bubbles here and there. Detective Doyle, how nice to see you again. Likewise, Drake replied. As I was saying, continued Nell, the penguins need our help. When crude oil spills into the ocean, it weighs down the penguins' feathers. Many of them drown. So very sad, said Professor Fossey, scrubbing a struggling penguin. If they can make it to shore, we wash them, said Nell. But, said Professor Fossey, no matter how much we bathe them, some of the crude oil is left behind. Correct, Nell nodded. Then, when the penguins preen their feathers, they accidentally swallow the oil. Many of the penguins you see here will die from oil poisonings. The camera focused on Nell. She looked quite serious, but that's not all. The crude oil and the washings have destroyed the penguins' natural oils, which help keep them warm and waterproof in cold water. You see, the terrible fact is, even if they don't die from swallowing the oil, they'll freeze in those waters. Drake slumped into a chair, unable to stand a moment longer. This was, simply put, just horrible. The penguins on Penguin Island were not only being poisoned, they were freezing too. What can we do? He asked. Nell thumped her fist for emphasis. That's why I'm contacting you. We simply must find a solution. Doyle and Fossey, to the rescue. Chapter 4. An Urgent Plan. Drake ran all the way home, tripping only twice. He flew through the back door and up 2 flights of stairs. Be careful, hollered Mrs. Doyle. Don't blow up the lab, hollered Mr. Doyle. I will. I won't, hollered Drake. In the attic lab, Drake searched for his most useful scientific book. It was on the shelf where he normally kept it. Then he heard a grrr and a rip. Following the sound, Drake discovered something terrible, something horrible. Another major disaster, you might say. For tucked away beneath Drake's desk lay Dr. Livingston, chewing on the book. Cats! Cried Drake, snatching the book away. Frantically, Drake thumbed through the right page. It said, Penguin Rescue, what to do when there's an oil spill and the poor little penguins are freezing to death. Then Drake gasped. The rest of the page was missing. Dr. Livingston, he said in his most sternest scientific voice. What have you to say for yourself? Burp. Drake paced the floor. This is terrible. Turning. Nell's counting on me. Turning again. Penguin Island is counting on me. Turning again. The penguins are counting on me. I simply must find a solution. Oh, this is dreadful. What a calamity. Drake searched the internet. Drake asked his parents. Drake bicycled to the library and talked with the librarian. Drake phoned environmental agencies, but no matter whom he asked, the answer was always the same. Give the penguins a bath, they all said. There's nothing more you can do. After school the next day, worried as ever, Drake hurried back to the nature headquarters. Calling naturalist Nell. Calling naturalist Nell. Do you read me? Suddenly on the monitor there was Nell, holding a shivering penguin. Anything? She asked. Negative. Nell sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. Ditto here. The situation's getting more and more desperate. Thousands more penguins are straggling in, and now the weather's turned for the worst. Suddenly, the wind gusted and Nell wrapped the shivering penguin in her sweater. I just wish I could wrap all of them in a sweater. Poor little things. Drake blinked. What did you say? I said, I wish I could just wrap each one of them in a... Nell's eyes widened. Why, Detective Doyle, that's it, penguin sweaters. Great Scott, it's brilliant, simply brilliant. Suddenly, all around Drake, the crickets began to chirp, the frogs began to crow, the mice began to squeak. Indeed, everyone thought it was a brilliant idea. We'll have to act fast, Nell was saying. Professor Fossey can make a sweater pattern. And I'll post the pattern on the internet, Drake said. We'll need lots of help and lots of yarn. After they made their plan, Drakes went into the action. There wasn't a moment to lose. That very afternoon, He called all his friends and organized the Mossy Lake Emergency Penguin Committee. He gave them assignments and a pep talk. The penguins are counting on us. Are we going to let them down? No. I said, are we going to let them down? No. I didn't hear you. I said, are we going to let them down? No. Woof. The next day, an urgent plea was announced over the school intercom. It was broadcast over the radio. It was printed in the newspapers. It was posted on the internet. Calling all knitters. Calling all knitters. Penguin emergency. There was a contest at school for the classroom that brought in the most sweaters. There was an all-night knit-a-thon at the Mossy Lake Senior Center. Coffee and muffins, complimentary of Mrs. Doyle. There was a televised knitting race to see who was the fastest knitter. Knitting needles were selling like buttered hotcakes. Yarn stores were open 24 hours a day. The Mossy Lake Moose Club volunteered to box up and ship the sweaters. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, overnight express. Hour by hour, day by day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and then the moment of truth. The people of Mossy Lake stood in the town square, breathless, waiting, staring at the big screen mounted on the back of a truck. Then there she was, Doyle Fossey, nature's naturalist, live from Penguin Island. "Observe!" cried Nell, and the camera panned out. Dozens of little penguins swam in saltwater pools while wearing little sweaters. The sweaters were rather fashionable. Reds, greens, oranges, yellows, blues, quite a few hot pink ones. Solids and stripes, woolly turtlenecks, bows and ribbons. "Aww," cooed the people of Mossy Lake. "The wool sweaters keep the penguins quite warm," said Nell. "Not only that, but they can't preen their feathers and swallow the oil. And by the time the salt water dissolves the sweater, the little penguins will have replenished their natural oils and will be ready to return to sea." The people of Mossy Lake clapped and cheered. The people of Penguin Island clapped and cheered. The penguins waddled and dived and swam. It was quite a happy moment, really. Later, after dinner, Drake wrote in his lab notebook, "Oil and penguins do not mix. Sweaters fashionable. Penguins warm and cozy. Payment 0. Paid in full." All right, tune in to our next adventure to where we find Chapter 5, The Monster of Mossy Lake.